This is the story of Michael Gray, a homeless man who saved an entire theater in just 48 hours, and how, in doing so, he reclaimed his own life. It all started with a question laced with panic. No, that's impossible. You mean the entire system, all the lights, all the rigging, everything's dead? Evelyn Carter, the theater director, paced the stage, her voice trembling. Around her, the tech crew could only hang their heads. Leo, the head technician, answered wearily, "We've tried everything, ma'am. The control board is unresponsive. It's just a hunk of metal now." The tension in the theater was suffocating. They were only 48 hours away from the premiere. If they couldn't fix the system, the theater would lose millions of dollars and the reputation it had spent decades building. Just as everyone was sinking into despair, a deep, raspy voice echoed from the darkness. "The problem isn't the board." Everyone spun around. A man emerged from the wings. He wore a frayed coat, his hair was a mess, and he looked every bit the homeless man, but his eyes were another story. They were sharp and intelligent, scanning the complex web of cables on the ceiling, as if he understood them intimately. Leo scowled. "Who are you? You're not supposed to be in here." Michael ignored him, explaining slowly. "The board only gives the orders. The real failure is happening up there. Your rigging system is off balance, so it's locked itself down." A stunned silence fell over the group. Out of options, Evelyn looked at the stranger as if he were her last glimmer of hope. What did you say?" she asked, her voice wavering. Michael finally turned to look Evelyn straight in the eye, and in his tired gaze was an unshakable certainty. "I said, I can fix it." Everyone was floored by Michael's claim. Leo was the first to speak, his voice dripping with skepticism. "Fix it? You say that like it's a walk in the park. We're the tech crew here. We've been wrestling with this all night. You don't even know what kind of system this is." Michael didn't get angry. He calmly walked closer to the stage, his eyes still glued to the complex machinery above. "I don't need to know what kind it is," he replied. "They all work on the same principles of physics." He paused, pointing up to a massive winch hanging near the ceiling, where a giant set piece was held by dozens of cables. "You guys keep focusing on the software, on the control board, because you think it's the brain of the system, but you forgot to check the body. The problem isn't digital, it's physical, it's mechanical, it's in the cables and the counterweights up there." He broke it down slowly, in simple terms anyone could understand. He explained that during the last maintenance check, someone had set a counterweight off by just a couple of inches. It was a tiny error, impossible to see with the naked eye. But when the multi-ton set piece was lifted, that small discrepancy created an uneven pull. "It's like trying to lift a heavy box but grabbing it off-center," Michael said. "The box will tilt and jam. This system is the same. It sensed the dangerous imbalance, so it initiated a total lockdown to protect itself. That's why everything shut down." Leo's entire tech crew was dead silent. Michael's explanation was so logical it was undeniable. They had been too focused on complex lines of code to remember the most basic principles. Evelyn Carter stepped forward, the desperation in her eyes replaced by intense focus. "So, what's the plan? Can you recalibrate the counterweight?" Michael shook his head. "No time. That would take all day. We have less than 48 hours. We're not going to fix it. We're going to bypass it." He turned to Leo and his crew. "We're going to temporarily disconnect the automated controls," he commanded, his voice now full of authority. "Everything is going on manual. I'll design a simple secondary system, a rig that will slave the winches together to make sure everything moves smoothly and safely. It won't be smart, but it'll be precise and reliable." It was a bold, almost insane plan, but it was the only one that stood a chance in such a short amount of time. Leo looked at Michael, then at Director Carter, waiting for the final call. Evelyn took a deep breath. She looked at the homeless man before her, who seemed to understand her theater better than people who had worked there for decades. "All right," she said decisively. "I've got nothing left to lose. Do it. From now on, you're in charge." Without a second to waste, the theater became an emergency workshop. Under Michael's clear and concise commands, Leo's tech crew moved with a purpose they hadn't shown all night. They climbed scaffolding, disconnected automated couplings, and carefully rerouted cables to a temporary manual control system Michael had sketched out on a scrap of paper. There were no more complex lines of code. Now, everything depended on human hands and mechanical precision. After hours of grueling work, With sweat soaking through the backs of their shirts, everything was finally in place. They stepped back to look at their creation. The stage now looked like a chaotic mess of wires and levers, but according to Michael's diagram, it would work. "All right," Michael said, his voice hoarse with fatigue. "Leo, throw the main breaker. We'll test the lights one by one." Leo nodded, his heart pounding in his chest. He flipped the massive switch. A familiar bzzzzzt hummed through the theater. Then, disaster struck. The moment power connected, a loud crackle erupted from the control board, followed by a sharp pop. Every single light on stage, including the few remaining work lights, went out. The entire theater was plunged into absolute darkness and a terrifying silence. The faint smell of burning electronics hung in the air. A sharp gasp cut through the dark. Someone muttered a curse. "It's fried. It's completely fried," Leo yelled, his voice cracking with panic. "I told you, the system's overloaded. We're done for." The hope that had just been lit was brutally extinguished. Evelyn felt her legs go weak, but while everyone else was drowning in despair, Michael's voice cut through the darkness, unnervingly calm. "It's okay. Everybody relax. I was expecting this." In the darkness, they heard his footsteps approaching the main control board, the one they'd written off as a useless hunk of metal. He switched on the flashlight from his old cell phone. "This board has a hidden fail-safe mode," Michael explained. "It was designed for emergencies like this, to prevent a power surge from frying the hardware. Most of the younger engineers these days don't even know it exists." He aimed the light at a row of buttons. "Leo, come here. Press and hold buttons 3 and 7 for me." At the same time, Leo hesitated for a beat, then stepped forward and did as he was told. "Good," Michael continued. "Now, flip the auxiliary power switch. Easy does it." Holding his breath, Leo slowly pushed the small lever he'd never even noticed before. At first, nothing happened. But then, a soft beep echoed in the silence. A single green LED lit up on the board. Then, a low, whirring sound began to resonate through the theater. One by one, the stage lights began to come back on, not in a sudden flash, but with a steady, warm glow. A brilliant, golden light slowly washed over the entire stage. And then, the real miracle happened. The massive set piece hanging high above began to move. It descended with a silent, graceful ease, then smoothly ascended again, stopping perfectly in its place. Everything was running with dreamlike precision. Watching the spectacular sight before her, Evelyn Carter couldn't contain her emotions, her hands clasped together. The weight of the world had been lifted from her shoulders. And then, Leo started clapping. Just him at first, but a moment later, the other technicians joined in. The applause grew louder, stronger, echoing through the empty auditorium. It wasn't just the sound of relief. It was a sound of genuine admiration for the man who had made the impossible possible. Amid the roaring applause, Michael finally allowed himself to breathe. He turned, looking at his new teammates, and a rare smile, tired but proud, touched his lips. Under the stage lights he himself had reignited, Michael had found his place again. The moment the clapping died down, Evelyn Carter walked straight up to Michael. She looked at him not as a stranger, but as a savior. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, her voice full of sincerity. "You didn't just save a show. You saved this entire theater. Our technical director position has been vacant for some time now. I'd like to offer it to you, effective immediately." Michael froze for a second. He looked down at his own hands, still stained with grease, then at his worn-out shoes. He glanced at the old leather suitcase, the only remnant of his former life. Technical director, that's who he used to be, before everything fell apart. Accepting meant facing the world that had cast him out. But when he saw the look of trust in Evelyn's eyes and the admiration from the entire crew standing behind her, he knew he couldn't refuse. This wasn't just a job, it was a second chance. I accept," he said softly, but his voice was firm. And so, Michael's rebirth began. From the very first week, the difference was night and day. He wasn't just a brilliant fixer, he was a gifted innovator. He noticed the theater was wasting a fortune on old, hot, energy-guzzling light bulbs. He proposed a plan to replace the entire system with modern LEDs. At first, some balked at the upfront cost, but Michael presented a detailed cost analysis showing they'd save a massive amount on their electric bill and make their money back in just 6 months. The plan was approved, and not only did the theatre save money, but the quality and versatility of the stage lighting improved tenfold. Next, he turned his attention to the sound system. He spent 2 solid days walking through every nook and cranny of the auditorium, listening and fine-tuning each speaker. As a result, at the next performance, the audience was blown away by sound that wasn't just louder, but crystal clear and immersive, making them feel like they were truly living inside the story on stage. One afternoon, he was seen opening his old leather suitcase. Inside wasn't clothing, but rolls of yellowed design schematics. He pulled out a blueprint for a simple but incredibly effective rotating stage system. He pitched the idea to Evelyn. Just 1 month later, the theatre had a brand new revolving stage, allowing for seamless and dramatic scene changes, something they had only dreamed of before. Michael himself transformed as well. With new clothes provided by the theatre and a neat haircut, he no longer had the look of a transient. The weariness on his face was replaced by confidence and a passion for his work. The theatre staff, especially Leo, no longer saw him as just a boss. They looked at him with genuine respect and admiration. The stage wasn't just where Michael reclaimed his career, it was also where he met his destiny. Her name was Sophia Lee, the theatre's head choreographer, a woman with a fire of passion that always burned in her eyes. The first time they truly worked together was during a tense rehearsal. Sophia was running her hands through her hair in frustration, her dancers looking exhausted. "No, that's not it," she called out, her voice echoing through the theatre. I want it to look like they're dancing among the stars." But Leo keeps saying it's impossible. Michael, who was in the wings checking a cabling system, overheard everything. He stepped out, his voice calm. "Nothing's impossible. It's just a matter of figuring out how. What kind of stars did you have in mind, Miss Lee?" Sophia looked at him, surprised. She described her vision with infectious enthusiasm. Michael just listened silently, nodded, and walked away without making any promises. But the next day, when Sophia and her troupe walked onto the stage, they gasped. Michael had stayed up all night, hanging hundreds of tiny LED bulbs like a net from the ceiling. When he killed the main lights and switched on his new system, the entire stage transformed into a breathtaking, twinkling galaxy. "Oh my God," Sophia whispered, her eyes wide with wonder. "Michael, it's more beautiful than I ever dreamed." "Light is a dancer, too," he replied with a small smile. "It just needs a good choreographer." From that moment on, a seamless partnership was born. They were often the last two to leave the theatre. Late at night, after everyone else had gone home, they would sit on the edge of the stage, sharing stories. "When I was a little girl, all I ever wanted to do was dance," Sophia said, holding a paper coffee cup. "This stage is my entire world." "I used to have a world like that," Michael replied, his voice distant as he glanced at his old suitcase. He started showing her his old designs, explaining his bold ideas. Slowly, the icy walls he had built around himself began to melt. 6 months passed. One quiet evening, on that same familiar stage, Michael knew it was time. "Sophia," he began, his voice hesitant, "there's something I've never told you. The reason why you met me the way you did." He told her everything, holding nothing back. The betrayal, the false accusations, the family he lost, the years spent wandering the streets. When he finished, he lowered his head, unable to meet her eyes, but Sophia gently took his hand. "Michael, I don't care about the man you were in the past," she said, her voice soft. "I only know the brilliant, kind man sitting in front of me right now. Your past doesn't define you. Who you are now is what matters." Michael looked up, his eyes welling up with emotion. Will you marry me, Sophia? I don't have much, only a promise to rebuild everything with you." Sophia smiled, happy tears streaming down her cheeks. "Yes, I will." When Evelyn Carter heard the news, she called them both into her office. She placed a key on her desk. "I heard the good news," she said with a warm smile. "I think of you two as family. This isn't a wedding gift. Consider it a new start for your family." From the theatre, it was the key to a new, beautiful, and cozy apartment. For the first time in years, Michael Gray had a place to call home again. But not everyone was happy for Michael. In a dark corner of the theater world, envy and resentment were festering, and they belonged to a man named Victor Miles. Victor was a veteran set designer who had worked at the theater for decades. He was once a respected name, but in recent years, his designs had become stale and uninspired. It was Victor who had set the counterweight incorrectly, causing the near catastrophe that almost ruined the theater. When Michael arrived, fixed everything in 2 days, and was then appointed to the position Victor had always considered his own, he felt deeply humiliated. He couldn't stand the thought of being replaced by a vagrant. Every piece of praise for Michael felt like a knife to his ego. He haunted the theater like a ghost, watching everything with venomous eyes. "Look at him," Victor muttered to a former colleague. "That homeless bum, ordering everyone around. Who does he think he is? He just got lucky." That hatred grew into a cruel plan for revenge. Victor knew every corner, every cable, every bolt in this theater. He knew its weaknesses, and he decided he would use the very stage that had made his name to destroy Michael. His chance came during the dress rehearsal for the new play, a spectacular production with massive set pieces suspended high above the stage. The rehearsal was going smoothly, everything running flawlessly under Michael's direction. While everyone was focused on the actors and the lighting, Victor slipped unnoticed into the winch control area backstage. No one saw him. With swift, practiced movements, he located the rigging system for a giant, fake castle wall. He pulled the safety pin and swapped the main load-bearing steel cable with another one that looked nearly identical, but which he had deliberately frayed to the breaking point. His work done, he silently melted back into the shadows. Out on stage, Michael was in deep concentration. He walked to the center of the stage to double-check a mark on the floor for an actor. "All right," Michael called into his headset. "Next cue, bring in the castle wall." He had no idea he had just ordered his own execution. From high above, the set piece began its descent, but instead of the usual smooth motion, there was a high-pitched screech. Sophia, watching from the front row, was the first to notice something was wrong. She squinted, looking up, and her heart stopped. The main cable was unraveling fast. "Michael!" she screamed, her voice raw with terror. "Look out!" At that exact moment, a dry snap echoed through the theater. The cable gave way. The massive set piece, weighing hundreds of pounds, plummeted directly toward the spot where Michael was standing. Time seemed to freeze. For a split second, Michael looked up and saw the colossal block of wood and metal hurtling toward him like a monster. He was rooted to the spot, his entire body paralyzed with shock. But Sophia didn't think. She launched herself onto the stage like an arrow. Ignoring all danger, she threw her entire body against Michael, shoving him with all her might. "Get out of the way." They tumbled to the floor just as a horrifying crash thundered through the theater. The castle wall slammed into the stage, shattering into 1,000 splinters. The floor shook. Dust exploded into the air. A dead silence fell. Sophia choked on the dust, frantically shaking Michael. "Michael, are you okay? Michael, answer me." Michael was dazed, his ears ringing, but he was alive. He stared at the wreckage, now just inches from his feet, and then at Sophia, who had risked her life for him. He pulled her into a trembling embrace. They had escaped death by a hair's breadth. Evelyn Carter rushed over, her face white with fear. "What happened? Is anyone hurt? Somebody call an ambulance." But Michael, after collecting himself, got to his feet. He walked to the debris and picked up the end of the snapped cable. He squinted at it closely. "This was no accident," Michael said, his voice shaking but firm. "This cable, it was swapped out. This is an older, weaker grade." His words sent a chill down everyone's spine. This was deliberate sabotage. Instantly, Evelyn took charge. "Lock this whole area down. Nobody in or out. Leo, check the security cameras for me, right now." The investigation was swift. The security footage revealed a horrifying truth. The image was grainy, but clear enough to make out Victor Miles slipping into the winch control area just minutes before the incident. His face was a mask of resentment. They found Victor in an old prop workshop, pretending to clean a tool as if nothing had happened. The color drained from his face when he saw Evelyn walk in with the police. "Victor, we saw the security footage," Evelyn said, her voice ice-cold. Victor tried to deny it, but faced with irrefutable proof, he finally broke. The rage and jealousy came pouring out. "That vagrant," he snarled, pointing a finger at Michael. "He took everything from me, my position, my respect. He doesn't deserve any of it." Michael looked calmly at the man who was blinded by hatred. "All you had to do was your job, Victor. This stage has enough room for everyone with talent." But Victor wasn't listening. The police cuffed him. As they escorted him across the stage, the very place he had dedicated his life to, Victor showed no remorse. Before being led out the door, he struggled against them, locking eyes with Michael, his gaze filled with pure venom. "This isn't over. I'll be back." His shout faded, but the threat lingered in the theater's air like a phantom. Victor Miles was gone, but the danger, it seemed, had not entirely vanished. Still, Michael and Sophia decided they would not let the fears of the past dictate their future. Life had to go on, and happiness was something they deserved. Their wedding was not a grand affair, not an extravagance. It was held in the one place that meant the most to them both, center stage at the theater. There weren't hundreds of guests, only their closest friends, Evelyn, Leo, and the entire tech crew, and the dancers from Sophia's company. They were their new family. The empty velvet seats of the auditorium stood as silent witnesses. Instead of lavish lighting, a single, warm spotlight shone down on them, creating a space that felt intimate and sacred. As Michael, dressed in a sharp suit, watched Sophia walk toward him in a simple white dress, he saw his entire world right there. "You found me in the darkness," Michael said in his vows, his voice thick with emotion, "and you pulled me into the light. I promise to spend the rest of my life making sure that light never goes out." Sophia smiled, squeezing his hand. "The first day I met you, I didn't see a stranger. I saw an artist, a lost heart. I promise to always be the home that heart can return to." They shared a kiss to the sound of their friends' heartfelt applause. The reception that followed took place right there on the stage, filled with laughter, stories, and a small wedding cake. It was a simple day, but it was warm and perfectly whole. 1 year later, life settled into a peaceful rhythm. The theater thrived under Michael's leadership. Sophia, too, was reaching new heights with her choreography. The apartment Evelyn had given them had truly become a home. One evening, in a small room bathed in the soft glow of a nightlight, Michael sat in an armchair, gently cradling a tiny bundle in his arms. It was his and Sophia's first child, a beautiful baby girl with her mother's wide, round eyes. Sophia emerged from the bathroom, smiling as she looked at the two of them. "Haven't put her down yet?" Michael shook his head, his eyes never leaving his daughter's angelic face. "I could look at her forever." They had given her a beautiful name, Luna. "Your name is Luna," Michael whispered to his daughter, as if sharing a secret. "It means moon." Before, Daddy's life was all harsh spotlights. But you're the softest, most peaceful light I've ever known. He gently placed a kiss on her forehead. In that moment, it felt as if all the scars of his past had finally healed. He had a family, a home, and a bright future waiting for him.